Hi, everybody. We hope you're doing well. We continue to pray for you and can't wait to rejoin again after these times. These times are so challenging that it reminds us that how important things that are constant in our life are. What are those constants in life that actually bring you comfort, that bring you peace? Maybe it's relationships. Maybe it's a restaurant. Maybe it's a drink. Maybe it's that corner of your house where you sit and pray or read. But there's things in our lives that we hold on to as constants that are there that actually bring us stability, that bring us comfort. Even though some of us really like change and some of us thrive on change, life is changing so much that we often look for things in life to be our anchor, right? Or to be the thing that we hold on to become a constant for us. So in the midst of life changing, we still want that thing or that place or that person or that relationship where we can always go back to and know, I'm going to be okay. I can hold on for one more day. Those constants help bring us the stability we need to face life that often is ever changing and so often feels like it's completely out of our control. I remember when we moved to Indonesia, so much was new, so much was different. Many things were exciting. The people are great. But there were times we just were tired, right? There were times that we just felt worn out. There were times we felt lost. And when we were in those moments, when we found something that was constant, something that was familiar, something that we enjoyed or held on to from the many, many years we had lived in America and other countries before then, when we would get to those places, it almost felt like we could catch our breath. Not that we would run away from life in Indonesia, but just that we would take a little break for a half hour or an hour to get that recharge that we needed and then go back. And then eventually Indonesia became life, right? And missing Indonesia is the thing that we want to hold on to. But I remember in those early years, we had just moved to one of the biggest cities. We didn't know anybody. We didn't have any friends. We didn't know how to get around. We felt incredibly lost. And then we drove by a mall and we saw a Starbucks. And if you know me, I'm not a fan of Starbucks, but we needed something, right? We were exhausted, we were emotional, we felt lost, and we saw this sign with the same font that we recognized and the words that we saw plastered over storefronts all around America, Starbucks coffee. And so we went in there, and as we walked in, everything seemed the same. The menu looked the same, the furniture looked the same, the decorations looked the same, the drinks were the same. And even though I'm not a fan of Starbucks, I ordered a coffee and we sat down, myself and my wife and my son at that time, and we sat down and we had our coffee in these chairs that felt really familiar, in this decor that seemed really familiar. And if we would have just closed our eyes to the outside world, we would have felt like we were back in America. And in that moment, that's what we needed to be refreshed and to be recharged, or to have that stability in the midst of life changing so much. And the name of God that we'll look at today is El Olam. It means the everlasting God, the God who is everlasting, the God who always is, the God who is always there, the God who never changes. One of the places we're introduced into this name of God is in Genesis chapter 1. Now, if you remember Abraham and Abraham's journey, he was called to go to a land that he didn't know. He was basically called to trust God and follow God, and he got his family and his possessions and he left. And it was a journey. There were times that were challenging. There were times they made mistakes. There were times there were fights. There were just so many challenges along the way. And in Genesis chapter 21, he's in the land of the Philistines, and he makes an agreement with Abimelech. And actually, Abimelech is asking Abraham to not cause them problems. And I almost feel that this is a spot in Abraham's journey where he feels like we've made it, right? That our journey can have a time of peace. We've gone through all of these things. Life has changed so much. And now we actually have this agreement in this land of the Philistines. And if you know the rest of the Old Testament, it's always a challenge, the Philistines, for Israel. But in this moment, there's a moment of peace. And reading in verse 33 34, it says this: Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and there he called on the name of the Lord, the eternal God, El Olam. And Abraham stayed in the land of the Philistines for a long time. So there was a sense that the thing that was always constant for Abraham, no matter what was happening in his journeys, was God. God was El Olam, the everlasting God. So even though the road went this way and then it went that way and the experiences happened this way and they made these mistakes and you never knew when you were going to arrive at the land that God had promised, God was the constant. God was the everlasting thing. God was the anchor. God was the familiar thing for Abraham to come back to. And in this moment, Abraham realizes that you're El Olam, you're the thing or the person who will never be different, who will never not be with me, who will never change. You know, in Indonesia, there's this great word, habis. Habis means it's all gone, it's all out. And there's different things that you'll see are habis, right? When you go to the store, a lot of times they might be out of gas. So you'll say minyak habis, and just things are not available. But the thing that was never habis in Indonesia that I'm familiar with was rice. Like rice was always there. There's different qualities of rice, and some rice is not actually that great. But you can always get rice. And even in times where we had friends living on an island, and during the month of fasting, certain days it was really hard to find food, they would even go to the ditches where water was growing and pull out some greens to cook with their rice. But they'd always have rice, and we could always have rice, and rice would never be habis. It was never not there. You knew if you needed to eat, you could at least eat rice. And in that sense, that's the idea we get from God, is that he's always there. And Abraham realized that in that moment. Here Abraham is in the land of the Philistines, right, who became an enemy of Israel, but he's there in this land of another nation with the other person asking him to make an agreement or a promise with them to not come attack them. And now they get to live there. And Abraham lived there for a long time. And during this journey where probably Abraham questioned God, where he left things that were familiar to him, the thing that was always there, the thing that was familiar, the thing that became the constant for him was God, El Olam. And one of the reasons why God wants us to understand this is because in our lives, the world is always going to change. Relationships will change. Job situations will change. You might go to school to study one thing and then end up doing something completely different in your life. And even us as people, we change. And so often we want that thing in life that's constant, that gives us stability, because oftentimes we can find peace in that stability. But God is that. And that's what God wants us to realize, is that he's the everlasting God. He is the one who is constant. He is El Olam. He will never leave us. He will never let us down. He is the same today, tomorrow, and forever. He's always been there because he's El Olam. And Abraham realized that through his journeys. And God wants us to realize that through our journeys as well. No matter what has happened to you during these times of the pandemic, no matter how you look at your future, no matter what is going on in your life, the constant that God wants us to find comfort in is him, because he's El Olam. I want to close with a passage out of Isaiah chapter 40. This is verse 28 through 31. It says this: "Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of heavens and of the earth. He will not grow tired, he will not grow weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary, and he increases power to the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, even young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." Because God is their strength, and he is constant, because he is El Olam, the Lord who is everlasting. God bless.